Here's a fun riddle. What do you call a journalist turned high profile magazine editor turned beloved and best selling author who is also a mother, a wife, and a dedicated cat mom? A trusted tita to the local book community, a passionate advocate for Filipino writers and stories, and a thriving Bookstagram and book talk creator, the one and only Claire Betita de Guzman. Welcome to Laking National Stories. I'm your host, Carlo Martinez, and today we are honored to be with Claire Betita de Guzman, the best-selling author of No Boyfriend Since Birth, Sudden Superstar, Way City, and her latest work, the short story collection, Good People. Thank you for joining us, Tita Claire,
Well,
as one of our first guests. So for Laking National Stories, the first question we will ask every person we speak to is, what was your first memory or experience at National Bookstore?
Carlo, first of all, thanks for having me and thanks for that wonderful introduction. So happy to be here. And of course, my gosh, National Bookstore has never been out of my life, even when I moved to Singapore. And really, it goes back. My first memories, my first experience with National goes back to the 80s when I was maybe 6, 7, 8, until 10 years old.
Mm,
And they had stores in Makati in Quad. And I bought all my Nancy Drew books there. And I think the complete collection. And those were my first memories going
mm,
to that store. I think it was in the basement. Going to that store and then picking out the Nancy Drew books. And
yes.
later on, I also have when I was saying memories of buying, asking my brother, who's also a reader, to buy books
Mm,
this high. Spoiled ako sa books when I was little, and it was national. I mean, and I completed, my Nancy Drew books, my Sweet Valley High books, my Sweet Dreams. I completed them
mm.
all, and I wouldn't have gotten them if not for National Books. I mean, where else would I get them? The books that shaped me, I got from National Bookstore.
And are there any memorable moments apart from having books, given to you or bought for you by your brother? Do you remember the first time you bought a book by yourself at National Bookstore?
I didn't have a particular memory of buying my first book in National Bookstore. But what I remember is me and my friends would go to National and buy school supplies. We love pens, we love notebooks, we love pads, and it would be a special trip going to National Bookstore. And as we were browsing, we would also look at the books and ask our parents to buy it for us.
I think a lot of kids can still relate to doing that today,
Yeah.
National Bookstore. But a fun story that I do want to bring up, and I hope you can share with us again, is how your book, No Boyfriend Since Birth, was discovered and eventually became a series.
Yeah. That's true. I wrote No Boyfriend Since Birth way back. And it was just part of this Asian chick lit
Mm,
series headed by Tara Siring. And I had so much fun writing that book. And it was quite the success back in the day. I I say that because I got a lot of emails from readers. I got a lot of feedback, or actually people who knew me, who messaged me telling me that it changed how they saw life or how they looked at relationships. But one day I received a call, and it was
mm,
from the staff of film producer Tony Gloria. They asked for me and they said, where's Claire Bitita? Because we want to meet with her, and this is about her book, which we are interested in turning into a movie. It was
mm,
it was a film at first. I finally met with Tony Gloria a few weeks after with my producer, with my publisher,
mm,
and Tony Gloria had this story about, what, we really want to make these love stories into films, and we were there in National Bookstore, and he said, I asked the lady there, saan ba dito yung bestseller? Ano yung mabenta dito? And the lady there said, ito po, oh, and gave him a copy, showed him a copy of No Boyfriend Since Birth. And then
mm.
he asked his staff to contact me at my publisher's office, and that started the conversation. Eventually, it was made into a special TV series,
Yes.
not a film, but
Mm.
a special TV series. But definitely, National Bookstore was such a big part of it, and it is such a it is such a funny, heartwarming, uh, just lovely story. Knowing that he just went to the bookstore and
Mm.
asked about it, and
Yes.
that is real because I heard it from Tony Gloria himself.
Now, before we continue diving into your works, I'd like to go back again to your childhood and where your early inspiration
Mm.
for storytelling came from.
You know what? I love trinkets. I
Mm.
love paper. I love uh, pens, and I
Analog,
yeah,
like
analog
really,
things back in the
yes.
80s. And my brother was 16 years older
Mm.
than I am. So I was practically an only child and I was very lonely. And that's why I turned to books.
Mm.
And I read books. I mean, I read all the Nancy Drew things. I read Enid Blyton books and all sorts, whatever I can find in the house, even poetry books that were lying in the house. I didn't, until now, I don't know who owns them. But when I was 9 years old, we were asked to do a poem in school about anything. Think about the rain or about nature. And I
Mm.
wrote a poem. I wrote like this long poem and rhyming pa siya. And you know what? When I wrote it, I felt so good. I was so proud of myself and I loved my poem. And I think that was one of the early experiences that made me realize ang sarap pala magsulat. And then I became obsessed with like diaries with a lock.
Mm.
So I wrote journal entries like that. Until now I keep a journal. So I think it was also having family members who were readers and just having books
Yes, that's
lying
really
around here.
helpful.
And honestly, trips to National Bookstore. I mean, National Bookstore was very prominent even before. You cannot not go.
Mm.
So my family would really pass by there, and every trip to Makati would have a trip to National Bookstore. So it really shaped me when I was small. And when I was 13, I read all these Sweet Dreams books, and I was
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with my Barkada, and I wanted to make a story out of them. So I wrote this 40-page short story, which was the first of several short stories, which was a love story about each one, how we were obsessing about the boy, how we were hating on our teachers, and it was called the One-Sided Parlor Gang. Our classroom was like a salon, and we would fix our hair. It bewildered my family why I wrote that love story, and they thought I was obsessed.
Did
Or
did you ask them to read it, or
I
did they?
did. I asked my dad to read it, and I made like a cover. Yeah, I
Wow.
made like but it's like it's ball pen and highlighter. I just made a cover, and then I fastened it and put it inside the folder. It exists until now, typewritten.
Oh,
And
you've been able to preserve it.
it was my mom. I discovered it in my mom's things.
That's
So
amazing.
I have like this thick, several short stories, typewritten, and with the makeshift covers. And yeah, and I wrote them. I wrote a story in one afternoon. The power of being young.
Yeah. So you wrote a poem at 9,
Yeah,
and then what is essentially fan fiction about your Barkada
yeah,
short stories at 13. And that early experience writing and storytelling eventually led you to studying journalism.
exactly. Yeah. Honestly, fun fact: I wanted to be a doctor,
Oh, wow.
but how can I be a doctor? I'm scared of blood.
Mm.
And my family pointed that out to me. They said, "How can you be? You'll faint if you see blood." And then they said, "You love to write. You love to read." They said, "You have such a great vocabulary, Claire. Yet you love writing. Why don't you become a journalist? You can earn from that." And they said it can be a pre degree for law. I mean,
Mm.
back in the 80s, everybody
Yes.
wanted to be lawyers, doctors, nurses, whatever. So I was less interested in law, but the thought of journalism, of writing still interested me. So I said yes. So basically, I
Mm.
followed my parents. I really did. Even though my heart was wanted to take up biology, science, whatever, chemistry, but I was not that good in it. Was just maybe what was expected of me. But I'm glad my parents really um showed me the path. And that's why I took up journalism in UP.
Yeah.
I actually had a great time. And up until now, I'm still thanking my parents because I hadn't, I felt like I was in my element. I
Mm,
mean, it was not easy writing all those papers, but it was normalized for me. And it taught me about investigative journalism. It taught me about what's important. Like you put what's important up front, that kind of new structure. It taught me how to do ambush interviews, how to interview people, how to be with people, which is still um not easy until now. But it was a good foundation for me.
that's amazing.
Mhm.
And let's talk about your early years as a journalist.
Mm,
Those were the formative years of your professional career.
yes.
Any memorable experiences, or what would you say was the most important thing you got from that first part of your career?
Ah. Yeah, my first job was as a lifestyle reporter in Today. But before that, I was actually hired as a news writer for the news section. I was
Mm.
supposed to handle Department of Justice.
Oh, wow.
And before that, I interned as a writer for um uh and my beat was NBI.
Mm.
So I was at the NBI and police stations, looking at blotters, talking to policemen. It was fine because I was young. I mean, I was like 20 years old. So that was fine. And then in Today newspaper, they had an opening in the lifestyle section.
Mm,
They
okay.
needed a writer, and then they said, we'll just borrow Claire, but
Mm,
then we'll return Claire to the OJ. Okay, so they borrowed me, and then I thrived because I loved writing about lifestyle stuff. It was about restaurants, hotel, travel, people, achievers, uh, people who started their own entrepreneurs, artists. So I'm glad that my editor, Abe Florendo, recognized
mm,
that and he asked to keep me. One memorable memory from that is Chuchay Fernandez, who's the managing editor, taught me how to edit. She called me from wherever I
mm,
was and then she said, "Come, let's shorten this headline." And I saw firsthand. As a young writer, you think, okay, I'll write. And no one can cut my writing. You adjust to my writing because these
mm,
are wonderful words. These are for me. These are created by me, right? As compared to space. But Chuchay, the people in the newspaper, they taught me that you as a writer need to work with the space you're given.
mm,
So I saw firsthand the layout and they said, what's the word that could fit into this space? And she started subtracting, adding, and she asked for my opinion. And I said, wow, so this is how the world works. We should adjust and then it challenged me to think of another word. It challenged me to think of another structure for that sentence. So I think that's editing was one of my greatest takeaways from being in the newspaper. And second, I think being with people.
being with.
My first press con, I couldn't speak. I was with other journalists, and the peer person said, and they said, they asked their questions. It was nothing heavy. It was about a fashion
Mm,
person, and I could not speak to the point that the peer person asked me, "Claire, are you okay? Are you sick?" And I said, "No, no." And then, but still, I could not ask my question. After that, I told myself, I have to work on this. If I need my information, I need to talk, to learn how to
mm.
talk to people and ask questions. Thank you for that.
That's a really important skill. And I think it's also served you well over the years. And going back to learning about editing, after many years of working, you eventually became an editor for some
Yes.
amazing magazines. Can we learn more about that? And how
Yes.
did that come about?
Yeah. After I left the newspaper to go into PR actually to to earn more money.
Mm.
it, because I was a young mother at that time. So it was nothing is linear. So I had this quite convoluted path to getting the positions I want. But as you know, I could not do I couldn't do marketing copy for a long time. And I was still craving to write features. At one point, I was even hired at AIM to be a speechwriter. This is
Oh,
just part of growing up, of being part of a family, of
yes.
earning. Oh, I like the salary, but I had to do a lot of marketing copy,
Mm.
yearbook stuff, and speeches of the president of AIM.
Okay. Yeah.
But then I really looked for the magazines. I mean, for feature writing. So I applied. I applied to Preview. I applied to to Preview first, and then when I was accepted there, I worked as managing editor in Preview, and then I discovered I wanted to be in Cosmo. I applied to Cosmo under Mirza season, and
Mm.
they made me write a cover story. While in the magazine, in Cosmo, it was super fun. It was really fun. I was exposed to a lot of artists, a lot of writers, to a lot of creative people. But then I had to move to Singapore. And there I found work again, which was in Harper's
Fish Bazaar.
Bazaar. I
Yes.
think the real work was there. They had a different working ethic in Singapore, and I really had real the devil wears Prada moments
Mm-hmm.
in working for a fashion magazine, especially in Singapore. In Singapore, it was really on the map. So we would have a lot of invitations from really high profile companies, and we had a lot of advertisers. So our staff in our magazine would be invited to go to Scotland next week,
Mm.
go to Brazil in 2 weeks. So it was that fast, and it was that visible. But it was hard. We had back to back meetings. And the lifeblood of publications, the lifeblood of magazines are advertisers. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely we served our advertisers. Everything had an advertising angle.
Yes.
So that's the reality of it. So I think my takeaway is that it's magazines are a business, a real business. And I guess for in a way it's a dream job. But the other side of it is honestly you cannot write what you really want.
Mm.
You're dictated by a lot of things. As you're dictated by advertisers, by by I guess trends, by marketing, by a lot of things. But it will train you, it will hone you, and it will teach you how to present yourself. And I think one memory from Harper's Bazaar is we had interns, and I was also on a lot of trips. I got invited to Tasmania, Australia. Everything was so fast.
Mm.
But and I was there for like 6 days. But all 6 days I worked. I only had 1 hour to shop, and I love shopping. I worked. The moment I landed in Hobart,
Mm.
I was at 9 a.m. By 10 a.m. Um, I was stepping, mashing grapes with my
Mm.
feet in a vineyard. It was that crazy. And then on and on and on until 12 midnight, until 11, where I was still interviewing the chef for uh for a restaurant. So it
Mm.
was that hectic. And one intern said, "Oh, we would love to travel. That's such a dream thing. That's such a dream job to be able to travel for work." I said, "If I could pass on the work to you, I would." But I can't. Like they invited me because traveling as I guess as a magazine writer or as a lifestyle editor requires you to be there to work really
Mm.
to have interviews the whole day. It was like attending press cons for the whole day for 6 days.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's a reality. And magazines they have skeletal staff. We don't have a lot of staff, so people are multitasking. But it's great training. Mm.
So as you said, it's a dream job for a lot of young girls and young women, but perhaps it's not as glitzy and glamorous
Not.
as it might seem.
Mm.
Was there a specific moment that made you decide to step away from that
Mm.
and focus on your writing fiction specifically?
Yeah, because I really wanted to write books even when I was young. I
Mm.
really wanted to. create stories, like fictional stories, it never really left me. So every time I was in the office, I was still reading. I was still
Mm.
reading short stories. I was still reading literary stuff. And I also was still writing in my journal, and I dreamed of writing stories. And I had already published some books in the Philippines. So I said I could not write another thing about a brand. I would love to
Mm.
just write a fictional story about a woman struggling, about whatever. So I started. Luckily, because Singapore is small, um, friends who worked for a publisher also recommended me.
Mhm.
It's Marshall Cavendish was the publisher, and they also started this Asian chick lit series, and they asked me to do a love story, starring a Singaporean, a romance story, and I did, and I enjoyed it very much. And I did it while I was working in the magazine. In fact, when I was traveling, I would wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. just to write it, because that's how much I wanted to do it. Not
Mm.
really to have it published, but to create a novel, a story. So, and then I decided, okay, I can't do both. I have to choose. And I really, the answer was, I really wanted to choose writing books. So I quit my magazine job and focused finally on being a full-time fictionist, a full-time novelist. And that was the start.
And I'm sure a lot of readers are grateful that you made that choice. But several of your books were written while you were still living in Singapore.
Yeah.
How was life in Singapore as a Filipina,
Ah,
as an author,
yeah.
as a wife and a mother? How was that experience? Because you were there for how many years?
I was there in Singapore for 18
18
years.
years.
We lived there for 18 years with my family.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a different kind of experience. It's intimidating at first, I guess. But the good thing about Singapore is towards merit. So it it doesn't have to be anyone you know. You just have to be good, and you'll be rewarded. You'll be recognized, I guess. It was one of the factors that made it easy for me to integrate with the Singaporean literary
Hmm.
crowd. Singaporeans are great writers. They have a lot of good exposure. They have good training. They have the infrastructure,
Hmm.
so they can produce a lot of good stuff. They have really wonderful poets in Singapore, but their experience is different. So at first, it was not hard, and there's a big Filipino community
Hmm.
in
Yes.
Singapore, where for whom I can also write my stories. But still, it's different. At first it was a great novelty. It's nice to be away. It's nice to have a different environment. It was a relief, actually. One thing that I rarely share to other people, I found it hard to write in Singapore. I spoke to other Filipino writers,
Hmm.
and they share the same sentiment. They said they they miss the angst of the Philippines. They said they miss the chaos of the Philippines. Whatever, even poets uh, told me, "Oh, it's the atmosphere here is different. It doesn't. It's not conducive
To
for me
writing.
to write." And I know a famous Filipino poet who shared that with us. So I don't know, but I think it's just the predictability of things. It's a totally different atmosphere. They don't have the same problems as us. And for a while, I wasn't exposed to the grit, really, and the realness of our problems, which is really ours. And I guess I was also seeking that familiarity.
Hmm.
So it was hard to write, but we still needed to work. So I still wrote. We all still we
Hmm.
all still wrote. And yeah, it was a good life. And I admire Singaporean writers, Southeast Asian writers. But there came a point after many years where I told myself I needed to promote Phil Lit,
Mm.
Philippine Lit, because all these years I have been exposed to people promoting Sing Lit, and that was the norm. Singapore literature is really provides Singapore. And they are so proud of their culture. They're so proud of their writing. They're so proud of their writers.
Mm.
So I said, it's time for me to it's time for me to really drive the point and promote Philippine Lit. And come 2023, I went to PBF. I saw my first time. That was my first time in PBF. I saw all the great books. I met some of the authors, and it just affirmed me that wow, that Akdang Pinoy is really thriving,
Mm.
and this is where I needed to be. Not only because it's thriving, because this is where I needed. I felt there were readers who deserved really good books. There were writers who needed mentorship and guidance. And Singapore, they have it. They have everything,
Yes.
which is what is lacking in the Philippines. And I felt I could contribute, give back to the community that shaped me. So part of the reasons that I came back.
So after 18 years, you chose to return to the Philippines. Why Zambales? What about that area appealed to you and Tito Alfred?
Yeah, actually, Zambales is a very beautiful place. And when we saw this plot of land, which had a really great view
Mm-hmm.
of the mountains, a very beautiful view of the
It's
mountains,
idyllic. It's a really idyllic
super idyllic.
space.
And it has like a stream. A stream is running through it,
Through the lot.
through the lot.
Oh wow.
Yeah, a very clear stream, that very clear but shallow stream runs through the lot. And so it's a cool place to be. First thing I thought was I could I could write here. It's funny because it was that thought. We are not from Zambales. I'm from Iloilo, and
Yes.
my husband is from Bulacan. But it was just the place, and it was Luzon. It's accessible from Manila, where I wanted to to teach and mentor writers. So it was just like a perfect combination of those things. Perfect place to write, and a perfect place to invite others to be there and be inspired by the surroundings, by nature. We are planning to build a
Mm.
writing center called Sining Sulat, which will be there in Zambales, mostly for accessibility, really. And so you don't have to get on a plane to experience this. um, People can, it's an easy place to go to.
It has been a pleasure learning more about your background. Now let's talk about two of your recent works. First was your debut literary fiction novel, Way City. Can you tell us briefly about it?
Okay, Way City is a Southeast Asian novel told from three points of view:
Mm.
one from Filipino, from a Singaporean, and Vietnamese. And it's basically a novel about starting over. And it's set in Manila, in Singapore, and in Vietnam, and how these different lives intertwine in their desire to change their lives.
And all of your novels before that were definitely more romance,
Yes.
also sort of young adult.
Yes.
How was that experience transitioning to a, you mentioned before it was over 100,000 words, the original
Yeah.
manuscript.
Yes.
So how was that transition like from going from those novels to Way City?
That's super interesting because and that was a source of insecurity before.
Mm.
I thought that I was made for writing chick lit novels, romance, literary romance. I thought I
Yes.
was made for that.
Mm.
And definitely I'm comfortable doing it. But I'm a very emotional person. I felt something, and I cannot get rid of that feeling of wanting to write something darker, heavier maybe, and just different. And I read a lot of literary fiction. I mean, I read different things, not only romance. And it was a source of insecurity because I thought I could not jump from
Mm.
one genre to the next. In fact, there was a talk by Kirsten Chen of Counterfeit.
Mm.
I'm not sure if you read it, but it's a great book. I was so insecure. I could not stop myself. I asked her during the talk. I said, Kirsten, what do you think of changing genres? And she was the one who told me. She was the one who told me that you should be proud that
Mm.
you're able to shift from one genre to the next, and there's no shame in jumping from romance, for example, to literary fiction. It's a talent actually to be flexible that way, and I think the the way she said it, it empowered me and really affirmed me and told me, okay, I'm right in deciding that I am going to write a literary fiction book. And Quacity has always been there. I mean, I wrote it in 5 years, and
Mm.
even as even as I was writing my romances and my rom coms,
Yes.
it has always been there, like drafts of it. It never really left me, and so I decided to pursue it when I gained advice from great writers.
One of the things I loved about that book
Mm.
was how complex the characters are and their relationships and their storylines. How was it like having to craft that over 5 years, as you mentioned?
It was both wonderful and terrifying.
Mm.
I savored creating characters, but I also was so frustrated by them because they took on lives of their own. But I really am a character uh, writer, a character driven writer.
Yes.
And now, learning from reading so much books, talking to writers, being at panels, now I learned that it's really all right for characters to drive the plot instead of plot driving
Mm.
characters. So all of these, they empower me to just stick with it. And if you say complex, I think it was not as complex to write the characters. It's just
Mm.
thinking about yourself. It's thinking about what you're going through each day and writing it down, expressing it in some way, or what your friend is going through, or what your family is going through. As I said, like I don't need like fantasy to to have extraordinary aspects
Yes.
for a story to have extraordinary. I just need everyday life. The mundane stuff is already extraordinary. Humanity, humans being humans are already um, complicated as it is. So writing those complex characters was a joy. It was hard because I had deadlines, but basically I savored doing it, and I'll continue writing those kinds of stories.
And one really interesting thing we've talked about in the past briefly was between novels, full length novels, and short
Yeah.
stories. You actually prefer writing full length novels.
Yes.
What is it about that longer format that appeals more to you as a writer?
I guess it's just a comfort for me to have that space to develop a character,
Mm-hmm.
to describe a setting, to do backstories, and to have subplots. See? I mean, I could do so much. So I love that freedom. And I guess I'm used to enduring, I'm used to the daily frustration, to the daily squeezing out of words. I'm used to it. So I just do it every day, a novel. Each story is a universe in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a person, as a writer, you know that you would give all of yourself in that universe. So
Mm-hmm.
I do. I give all myself. But then I have to go to the next universe, which is the next short story, and that's it wore me out. Yeah, if not for the love stories,
Mm-hmm.
I would not have finished all. But I had stories, I had different stories. But it's hard emotionally. It's hard physically. It's just hard to jump from one universe where you give your best and go to another universe where you also need to give your best. Stories, short stories are a challenge. Each word needs to count.
Mm-hmm.
Each sentence, each scene needs to move the next scene forward. All the more that it's crucial. In
Yes.
novels, you can meander, you can ramble, you can put in a backstory, but short stories are more demanding
But
this way.
despite that difficulty and the demand of it, your most recent work, which was a 5-star read for me, was Good People Stories,
Mm.
which is also your homecoming book and your
Yes.
first title with Anvil Publishing. So
Yes.
it's a really special collection. Can you tell us more about it?
Super special collection. I'm happy to be published by Anvil. I think they were the perfect publisher for um, this collection. It really found a home there, and I was just very conscious of people's attention spans,
Mm,
and I thought, and I've always dreamed of writing a collection of short stories. So I tried, and I had stories spilling out of me, and now I'm more confident as a character writer. So I really made it a character driven collection. And these are about people who want to be good, who try to be good but end up doing bad or making questionable decisions, and which is us, which is you and me, really. So it was not hard for me to get from real life, to get from my crazy, twisted imagination. These are 10 stories, and they range from characters who are thieves, serial cheaters. There is a gold digger. There's there are normal people. There are teachers there,
mm.
and other characters, and it's set in Southeast Asia, not just in Manila. It's even set in Paris, and there are corrupt politicians and all sorts.
That's one of the things I loved about the collection is how you went with different themes, different plot twists for each of the 10 pieces. And interestingly, in the title story, we have a character from Way City who appears. Can you tell us why you decided to bring that character back or to write more with them?
Yeah. As I said, Huey City is actually 200,000 words, and I had
200,000.
to cut it in half. And there were many side characters there
Mm,
who had to be shortened. And people notice, readers, they tell you, I really learned
mm,
from readers, they tell you what they need. And
yes.
many told me, we're interested in this character. He's called Max.
Mm,
And several times I get messages, I get, comments saying, oh, we want to know more about Max. Next time, Tita Claire, you should write a story about Max. Of course, I follow my readers. So uh, it's super valid. So now I want to write a story about Max. I'm surprised that other people like the other stories because it, good people really started with Max.
oh, okay.
Yeah, he started this collection.
He was the catalyst
Yes,
for it. Okay.
like a person who's obviously doing something bad, but
Mm,
actually he's a good person. So it was really because of listening to readers, and that's how important readers are for me. I really listen, and they're right. Honestly, it's one of my favorite stories, just because it started it all, just because it's that meaningful to me. I cannot say if readers were happy about it or not. I have had reactions, good
yeah.
and bad. Okay, I have had reactions, but the story had to go that way. I I I honestly explored other
Mm.
options, but the story just had to go that way.
I mean, it's definitely memorable. And
Yeah.
being the title story, it was also the first I read. And
Yes.
like I said in my review, it set my expectations really well for the rest of the collection. So Good People was the catalyst for it. But out of the 10 pieces, what would you say was the trickiest or the one that you had to spend the most time
Okay.
sort of developing and
Yeah.
figuring out?
I love that question because I have the answer right here, and it's the title is called A Lifetime of Luxury. I think it was one of
It,
your
it was
favorites.
my favorite.
Yeah. And a lot of people started mentioning it as their favorite
Mm,
as well. And I'm surprised because it was hard. I mean, I thought it would be easy. I really thought it would be easy. It would be enjoyable writing about this bad
mm,
character. And I was ready to give it to her. I was ready to judge her, make her bad, and just
yeah.
do all the awful things. But in the end, she redeemed herself in a way. And but then that also gave me a challenge on how to how to really form her character. So
Mm,
I rewrote it several times, and I worked with it with my editor for deeper, I guess, than the other stories because it needed a lot of work. I wanted to put in so much. I felt so much for this character that there was a point that nothing actually matched. So
Mm.
really the power of revision was there. It was revised several times. I was advised by my editor how to structure it as well. And I just did my best. I had a deadline and I just went in there and just did it.
I
Mm.
think it felt the most, not necessarily the most human, but it was, yeah, it had to do with the main character of that story. Something about her
Mm.
and her being a good person
Mm.
really just appealed to me. And that's why it really stood out amongst the collection, amongst
Wow.
the 10 pieces. And of course, Good People was released earlier this year. It was a bestseller at the PBF, the Philippine Book Festival, and has also been a consistent bestseller at National Bookstore for these past couple of months. How do you feel about that success and that overwhelmingly positive reception that Filipino readers have had for this collection?
Actually, I'm really I it was unexpected. I mean, it snowballed into
Mm,
this really wonderful uh, community talking about good people, and I'm still overwhelmed. I'm super grateful, and it was also eye opening. I mean, hearing your review made me
mm,
think of my story differently. I because I just write. I just write and hope that you'll be entertained. I just write hoping that you'll get the message. You'll get a message, hoping that it will touch you, it will move you. But then you, uh, people who have reviewed my books,
mm,
they gave me a lot of insights, a lot of illuminating insights that made me think differently about my story and actually articulated my own thoughts that I was just that I couldn't. I mean, I was in the middle of it all. So I'm really grateful and I feel seen. I really feel seen and I feel understood that, oh, you got what I was trying to say and we feel this way about life together or not, right? So
mm.
I'm I'm incredibly deeply happy about the conversations that it started. We had a
Mm.
big book tour with
Yes.
30 people reviewing the book. Each
Mm,
one had their own take. And that was so, I can't even express how much that means to me. And I have had people um, personally messaging me how reading the stories got them out of their reading slump,
mm,
and not only that, but how the stories actually changed how they view things, changed how they looked at life or their relationships or the way they wake up in the morning. It became as personal as that.
yeah.
And I also didn't expect that people would be discussing each story. I mean, we've
Mm,
had short stories and they're all like, it's a short story collection, it's this whole collection. But
yes.
here we have individual stories being discussed,
Mm,
being being highlighted,
yeah.
and I think I contributed. I feel happy because I made a contribution to readers and writers this way.
And it's interesting to also think about how your writing has evolved over the years, again, starting from those rom coms to Way City and then Good People. Can you tell us more about how you've refined your skill as a writer?
Mm. First of all, I write every day, like in my
Mm,
journal, even a grocery list. I write in longhand, first thing in the morning, whatever. It can be this small, it can be this long,
mm,
but it's really important to oil the parts.
mm,
So I write every day and I write poems on receipts. Writing is always there. If I'm mad, I write. If I'm sad, I write. If I'm happy, if I'm kilig, I write it. Another thing is I also read a lot. I read from authors that I want to emulate. I read young people's works and
mm,
to see how young people think. And then one important thing that also helped me was attending workshops. I aside from that, I took writing courses in Oxford
mm,
for several writing courses in Oxford. It was a very academic setting, but the teachers were very good, and it was hard. I was always looking forward to tea break because the discussion was just hard. And but it taught me, like for example, Oxford teachers taught me that, humbled me actually, that your manuscript is still a flexible, malleable thing.
Mm.
You should be able to change it according to the market, according to your publisher's needs, according to your audience's needs. Nothing is set in stone. You must be ready to change it, to modify it, to elevate it. I
Mm.
think that's what, and make it ready for the global audience. That's what Oxford taught me. Other things I did, I attended workshops. It was very accessible to do that from Singapore, and I attended workshops, writing workshops in Tbilisi, Georgia, and Miradu,
Mm.
France. It can be as simple as, such as in France, being inside a big house with 10 rooms and then having lectures around the dining table, but with very competent authors.
Yes.
It can be that. It can be as structured as the one in Tbilisi, where we were in groups and we had sessions every day talking about, writing about life, listening to teachers from all over the world, and having your work actually exposed.
Mm.
And I got a lot of flack, I got a lot of criticism as well. Praise, both praise and criticism for my work.
Mm.
Quay City was also workshop there, and you just learn from it. You just learn from it, and I think a lot of what I learned from those workshops from Oxford, I still apply now to the way I structure my story.
And as an experienced and best-selling author and experienced editor, do you have any advice for aspiring writers? Maybe just one thing that they should keep in mind or one habit that they should practice.
I think what I discovered, talking to a lot of aspiring writers, they always want to be ready when they write.
Mm.
Like, I keep on encouraging them, write this essay, or
Mm.
or do this collection. I'll say, oh, when I'm ready. My advice for young writers is start even
But-
when you're not ready.
Mm.
Just go in there and do something, anything. There is no ready time. The time to write is now.
There's no perfect moment.
There's no perfect moment. There's no cabin in the woods. There's no perfect spot. So if you want to write, or if you want to do anything, do it now. It doesn't matter if you're ready or not.
And as an editor, is there anything specific you look for when you review a manuscript or even just a short story submission, for example?
As an editor, I would love to have a piece of writing that's clean, a
Mm.
piece of writing that already has been self edited. You won't believe it, but I have writers who submit stories with no punctuation marks because they rely on editors to do it. I have writers who submit with run on sentences, with badly spaced formats.
Mm.
What I look for in a manuscript is something that's clean, something that has been revised in a way, because nowadays self-editing is important. You you have the power to edit yourself, and you have the power to shape your manuscript. Editors are there to to have that final polishing.
And apart from your own books, you have also edited your own anthology called Plot Twist, which I am part of. So, can you tell us
Yay.
more about that? And is there going to be a volume two?
Yes. I love plot twist. Also, I didn't expect it to be such a wonderful success because of my need to encourage writers to just write now. It all that idea started last MIBF 2 years ago. Uh,
Mm.
I was just with my street team and I said, let's just make an anthology and it should be about change, because we were all sharing what happened to us in the pandemic, or whatever challenge we just had like recently. And I said, this is the perfect topic, how we survive this change. It was not a structured start. It was just out of love. And I asked people who I felt wanted to write,
Mm.
and who has expressed to me their desire to write, and ask them. And I there was no pressure to it for Plot Twist Volume 1. It was just really writing about your experience or what you think, or a fictionalized version of anything, just to
Mm.
express yourself. And I did it, and then I actually did everything from cover to inside pages to printing. I did it. I did the final things in a little more than a week,
Mm.
but in that week, it healed me working on the stories, editing the stories, and I guess I'm confident editing. I looked at all the stories and going through it again and again. It just healed me, and I said, "My goodness, like this is really a worthy collection," and I'm glad I did it. So everything felt natural, Carlo. It's really not for fame or for whatever.
Mm.
Yeah. It's really for the love of
The craft.
writing,
Yeah.
the craft, love of reading, to have something
Mm.
to read as well.
Yes.
For the love of life, I want to read something that helps me. So it felt natural to do this collection, and I had the means to do it. I had people, I knew people,
Mm.
and I began to know writers. So it was so rewarding, and definitely there's a volume two. We're just gaining momentum
Mm.
because we're doing a lot of things, but
Yes.
definitely there's a volume two and more volumes. Perhaps, Carlo, you'll be the editor now of the other volumes. I mean, don't close your door on those things.
That would
Diba?
be interesting.
Yes,
Yes.
because I'm looking at other editors. I'm looking at co-editors. I'm
Mm.
looking at artists who will help me do the book.
Now, before we move into our final section, all about what you're currently reading, I cannot speak to you without bringing up your cats.
Yeah.
So, in the final story of Good People, you wrote about the greatest campaign of Ngis Ngis, who was a cat you rescued or
Yes.
adopted in Zambales. Can you share more about her story?
Yes, Ngis Ngis is I think she changed my life. She was a big part of my homecoming because we found her in the rental that we rented
Mm.
in Zambales the first day that we were there, and decided to take her in. And she was very, very scrawny. She was in bad shape. And we brought her to the vet and took her in, and she became
Mm.
sort of a indoor outdoor cat. We have the same personalities because she's also an introvert cat. She's very patient, I think,
Mm.
like me. And one thing I love about her is she's really in the moment. Like she'll just focus on this moment. And she has really brought us a lot of joy, and she gave us kittens. But she unfortunately she passed last May. She
Mm.
passed, which was a great loss to us, and but we're still grateful for how she affected our lives. And I don't know, my love was overflowing for this cat, that on the way from Manila to Zambales, while writing Good People, I thought of writing a story about her from her point of view. Mind you, I have not read any book or story that is from a point of view of a cat, of an animal actually. But then I wanted to honor her, and I just wanted to think about her
Yeah.
and bring out her best qualities. I
Mm.
just wanted to think about it again and again. So I thought of this story to write, and spoke to my editor, and told her that, okay, I wrote this story. It was the fastest story that I've written.
Mm.
It was done in 3 days because I was just so inspired by her, by having like a living creature in my home who responded to me and who had this personality.
And she was your first pet after
40 years.
a long, long
Yes,
time.
a long while. 40
So
years
really
ago,
special.
I had dogs. Yeah.
Oh, first cat as well.
Yeah, first cat
First
as
cat
well.
as well.
Yeah. So it was really special, and at this age, it was really new. And I told my editor, can this be the last story? And thankfully, she agreed when she read it. So it's a really meaningful story, and I'm still grateful to Nis Nis until now. Nis Nis. It was my husband who named her. It's I guess it's for Bungis Nis.
Mm. I think she was. She was an orange cat, but she wasn't stereotypically crazy because
You
that's what they say
know,
about orange
I
cats.
know. I think maybe the kittens. The kittens are
And
crazy. She's
lastly, can you
reserved.
share with us the names of those four kittens?
Yeah, I would love to share them with you. So we have four kittens, three orange white kittens, and one
Mm.
tilapia.
Mm.
And so they are Chaa, Bruja, Duende, and Sisig. Sisig because actually it's Ngis favorite food.
Food.
Yeah, she's into human food because she was a stray
Yes.
cat. So those are the names.
Thank you for sharing that story and good luck with those four kittens, Tita
Yeah.
Claire. Now we're going to move into the final section of our conversation where we just have some quick questions for you about what you're currently reading. So, what is the last book you read?
Last book I read was God's Ashes by Margot Ortigas.
Another great Filipino author.
Yes, for
And
sure.
did you love the book?
I love the book and I didn't expect to love it so much. It was such an unexpected, brilliant read. And until now, I'm in awe of Margot Ortiga's mind and writing. It was just written, well constructed, and written so with such sophistication.
What's
Mm.
the next book on your TBR?
I think I'm going to read Bing Sitoy's Call Me Pretty.
Hmm.
I'm still looking for that book.
Who is one author you'll never skip?
For me, I'll never skip Ronaldo Vivo Jr. I love his books. I have spoken to him. I
Hmm.
love how his mind works as well. And he really has a grasp of his genre, of his writing.
And apart from Way City, Good People, and your other books, what is one title you think everyone needs to read?
There is this one short story collection called In the Country by
Mm.
Mia Alvar,
Oh, okay.
which has also inspired me to write short stories. But what I love about it is it's very Filipino in the country. So Mia Alvar grew up in Brunei and she's now a Phil-Am. But surprisingly, all her stories are really incredibly Filipino and so well written and written with heart and quite deep. So I'm still waiting for her next book. And I think everyone should read it if you're Filipino, especially.
Now, you already mentioned working on Plot Twist Volume 2, but are there any other projects or specifically books that you are working on now that you can share with us?
So I'm writing a novel, um, and it's called The Luckiest Girl,
Mm.
and it's actually inspired by a lifetime of luxury.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So
Incredible.
and it's going to be set in Manila, Singapore, Paris, and Tbilisi because I love my settings,
Mm.
and there are a lot of side characters as well. So it's this whole novel about this character who you think has made it, but maybe not. Maybe she hasn't.
And as we conclude this conversation on Lucking National Stories, we started by asking you your first memory with National Bookstore. Now I'd love to know what your favorite memory with National Bookstore is so far.
I think my recent favorite memory with National Bookstore is really being there in any bookstore. I was in Mega Mall and I think Glorieta, being there,
Mm.
seeing my book, seeing someone pick up my book, and then me saying, "Oh, that's me," and they're so happy, and they asked me to sign it. Another memory is I was just there and someone just approached me and say and tell me, Miss Claire, can you sign my book? I mean, these are strangers. And I think that's the power of books and just being there.
Thank you for the amazing conversation, Tita Claire, and thank you for listening or watching. Her amazing and best-selling books, including Way City and Good People, are available at National Bookstore. You can find them in our branches nationwide, online on nationalbookstore.com, and on our stores on Lazada, Shopee, and TikTok Shop. I'm Carlo Martinez, your host. Thank you for listening to La King National Stories.